Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. I'm your host, Ashley Russo, president and executive producer of The Peak TV. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers who are winners in their field and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Welcome, everybody, to Unscripted with Russo. I have such a fun guest with me this week, Stephanie Wells from B104. You're going to recognize the voice right away.
Hey, hi.
Is here joining us. So, Steph, welcome.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. It's really my first time doing something like this.
Which is so funny because you are on the radio talking into a mic like this basically every day. It just hangs, right? Yours just hangs down.
Yeah, sometimes it's got a mind of its own. The arm kind of goes all over the place, but eventually, like when it's behaving, it'll be right there. But yeah, it hangs from the air.
Well, I'm so happy to have you here. You and I have kind of gotten to know each other through the years, being at different events, and I've been lucky enough to promote a few things on your show over the years. And I just thought it'd be fun to have you come and tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and your life and how it all came about. Because we just know you as the famous, Mike and Steph in the morning.
Yeah.
So sorry, Mike, I've got the Steph half today, but we'll have to have Mike on for sure. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I'm originally from Jersey. And
me too, Jersey girls.
Jersey girl hair.
Yeah, we love it.
I think my parents moved to Pennsylvania when I was about 4 years old. And then we lived in Quakertown. And I lived in Quakertown through high school, with the exception of 2 years. I went away to Pittsburgh to go to Performing Arts High School.
All right, I want to hear more about that.
I kind of always wanted to do that. And then from there, I went to school in New York and have kind of just moved around a little bit here and there. And then eventually, when the opportunity came up to do a show with Mike, I live in Jersey now, but obviously I make the commute here every day.
So you're growing up in Quakertown. How many siblings do you have? What's your family structure like?
Zero.
I'm
an only
child.
My parents, my dad's side of the family owned a stamp business. So it was postage stamps, stamp supplies, poll stamps is what it was called. And so I kind of grew up in a small business environment. I helped out in the stamp store doing different things. Mm-hmm. And
days off from school, you were probably...
I was there, and my mom was a school teacher. And so, it was just a really great upbringing.
That's neat. What were some of your hobbies? What were things that you were into?
Oh, gosh. Well, I really always wanted to be a performer. So I just kind of did a little bit of everything. I sang. I danced for a little while. I played soccer as a kid. I also liked art, doing sketches and stuff like that. In fact, I was so committed to being a performer that I actually came up with a stage name for myself.
Oh, please
And
share.
I designed my own album covers when albums were still a thing. And I was Sabrina, and my backup band was The Power. So it was Sabrina and The Power.
I love it.
And we were going to go to Superstardom, and that didn't happen.
I always wanted to be renamed Samantha. So I went through a whole phase where I really felt my parents had misnamed me, and I was meant to be a Samantha. Didn't happen, but that was so Sabrina and Samantha.
Right.
These alter egos. I like it.
Yeah.
That's great. When you think back to that time, what were your parents like with the artistic stuff? Performing in art, and a lot of times parents maybe aren't into that. Did it come from somewhere? And what was their feeling on it?
My dad was always very funny, always joking, always, when you're a small business owner and you're in a path where people choose to spend their discretionary income on something, part of the sale is the entertainment aspect of it. People are going to buy more things if they remember it being a memorable experience. So I think from a humor and a comedy and a performance standpoint, I probably got a lot of it from my dad. Mm-hmm. But my mom, she had to do a little bit of, kind of jumping around stuff too, being a school teacher, because, you do similar curriculum year after year, and you not only have to keep it entertaining for yourself, but you have to do it for your kids too.
Absolutely.
So that's probably where I got it from. And then, I don't know, I went to summer camp in town for quite a few years, and they just really wanted you to be super creative. And so all through the summers, I'd just be doing all these really fun, interesting things. And that's where it happens.
What specific type of performing? So you mentioned art, but was music a part of it? Was it acting? What kind of performance?
I'm a terrible actor.
Okay.
That's one of these things that has not really been afforded to Mike and myself as an opportunity yet to like act in like the Billboard movie,
Yeah.
which is now in theaters.
It is. It's coming
Zeke
back.
Zelker,
Thank you for
right?
mentioning. Yes.
Anyway, so we did not have speaking parts in that movie or parts at all for very good reason.
Well, I'd like to say that I do have a small speaking part.
Do you?
Yes,
Oh
I'm
my
actually the
gosh.
mean talk show host.
No, you're not.
And I don't consider myself an actress,
Yeah.
but I do some, of course, television. So I said, and Zeke is a good friend. I thought, well, this will be fun.
Yeah.
And, people have said, oh, you were really believable. And I said, well, I'm not really an actress, so maybe I'm just a mean talk show host. I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, that was my little foray into acting. So
yeah,
I
no,
know.
they recorded a portion of it here, or actually at the B104 studios, and I was just really fascinated, but I can't memorize lines.
No, the
It's just a
process, that was
thing.
really hard. I was very
Yeah.
panicked about that. And the nice thing is I felt like they do it in chunks, so
Yeah.
you could learn a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And I could never do like a soap opera. We have to learn 17 pages in a day or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
I guess it's a skill like anything else, but
But as far as like performing, like I was always into singing. I played clarinet and saxophone for a little while.
Now, were those the first instrument? What was the first instrument that you learned on?
My very first instrument was clarinet.
Okay.
And that started in 4th grade. That's when you were able
That's
to
that
pick
fourth
up,
grade.
pick
That's
up
still
an
a
instrument.
Pennsylvania thing, I think. Yeah, my kids
Jack
learned instrument.
Russo was my teacher, and he has this cool cat, and the room where we took the lessons was the size of a closet. But man, oh man, he had the mojo, and it was just like do, and you could play horribly, but he just made you feel like you were making progress and
awesome.
doing good things. So I played that for a while, and then I had gone away to school, and when I came back, I wanted to be in the high school marching band as a senior, but at that point they had too many clarinets. So then I picked up the saxophone, and I played that.
Picked it up.
Well, picked it up meaning like it's in the same family, so it's kind of similar,
I don't know. That
handling.
seems incredible to me. I don't play an instrument. I
Yeah.
took some piano, so when I hear something like that, I'm always amazed.
Yeah, and I still have my instruments because I was hoping that my kids, at least my older one now, who would have had the opportunity to play, would really be excited. And he played saxophone for a hot second, and then decided he wanted to be in choir instead.
When did you know that playing the instrument was something more than just a thing you got to do in school or something that you kind of had to practice and it became something you felt passionate about?
Well, I guess when I realized that, you were putting on these shows and that your parents and family and stuff were coming out specifically to see your performances, and so you wanted to do a good job. I definitely liked singing more, I think, in terms of the performance aspect of things. But it's also scarier because you are the instrument. And so if you forget your words, which I have, if you don't hit a note, which I've done, then, you're kind of putting yourself out there. You're really, I can't think of the word right now, but, you're
Kind of exposed.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
It's interesting as you talk to people who play an instrument and also sing, and I often hear that they feel like naked almost without their guitar or their violin or their ukulele or whatever it is, and I can see that they go together. It's a little bit of a blanket, you know, right? It's
Exactly.
interesting. And so tell me about the performing arts school. So you get through grade school, you love performing, you're playing the clarinet, you're singing. What is this thought that you have?
So you remember the show Fame?
Sure do.
Right. And
I actually have a friend whose son goes to the actual Fame school in New York that show is based on right now, currently. And it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But
so I love the show, and I thought, I love to perform. I love music. I love everything. Wouldn't it be neat to go there? So I started the early campaign, probably 11 or 12, to go to New York. Now, to live in New York by yourself, because I had no relatives there, as a, however old you are, 13, 14-year-old, that was not going to happen.
Right.
So then...
you didn't think anything of it, but your parents thought better
what do you
of
mean?
it.
I can't, take the subway and, schlep back and forth to school myself. So then we tried to find a similar program or a similar type of school somewhere else in the country. And as it turns out, that's a very large magnet program, kind of like we have charter schools now.
Okay.
At the time, they were magnet schools. So it just so happened that in Pittsburgh, they had a performing arts high school, which was related to the one in New York, like just in terms of curriculum.
Okay.
And my grandmother and a lot of my mom's family lived out there. So that's what I ended up doing.
That's
and I
amazing.
lived with my grandmother for 2 years.
And did you have to audition?
I don't really remember that part, but I'm sure I did. Like I came in probably like as a singer, like, did a little something, and then, you had to get accepted, and then you went to school, and kind of similar to what a student would do now if they went to VOTEC half of the day and then academic high school in the morning. That's what I did, but for art school.
For arts. Okay. And you moved in with your grandmother.
I did.
What was that like? I mean, what a shift.
It was really great. I feel like I got to know my grandmother a lot more than I ever would have just visiting on, random occasions. I also feel like my own experience growing up was very different because I did things that my parents didn't know that I did, but didn't get me in trouble with my grandmother.
Delicately, Steph. What do we mean
Well,
here?
I don't want to give any impressions, but I just had, you know what I mean? Like the probably things that I would have done at home, like hanging out with friends and doing stuff like that. But it was just on a different level because not only did I have to, respect, my grandmother and everything, and get home on time and not be dumb and like that kind of thing, but I also had to respect my parents because just as much as I was there and they were allowing me this experience, they could have just as easily taken it away if I was goofing off.
Sure.
So it was like a different level of maturity that was gained because
It's interesting that you understood that perspective though at that age, and I guess a little bit only child. Maybe you were maybe a little more mature, but that's a lot for your parents. I could see somebody says, "Well, they had there were 6 kids in the family, so they were happy for one to go away."
Yeah,
but as an only child, do you look back and think now as a mother yourself to what that might have been like for your parents to have given that kind of...
I feel like my dad probably had a harder time with it. Not to say my mom didn't. I think my mom was just worried that, I gave her such a hard time in like my, pubescent, like preteen kind of years. And, that was...
As girls tend
as
to do
girls
to their mothers.
And that was like the one thing that she kind of hung over my head was like, listen, if you keep like acting out or being not nice, then you're not going to art school. And so... I think for her, just the fact that I was doing it and succeeding and not, having all these issues, maybe it was better for our relationship because that's a hindsight thing. Like, that's not something that I came up with back then, but it's certainly like, I think it really kind of helped our relationship for me to be away and do stuff and come back.
That's kind of cool, actually. I could see that would be a benefit to that relationship at that time. Raising a 14-year-old daughter myself right now,
right?
It's sort of sometimes she'll spend some time with grandparents or friends, or we're horseback riding in the barn, and when she comes back, we're very grateful to be together if it's been 2 days or 3 days, even that little bit of time. So I like that idea. What happened that was the change? Why did you come back and finish high school here?
Well, my parents wanted me to have the high school experience at home because, that's the sort of thing where, if it doesn't work for you, like psychologically, or you have problems with your academics and everything, like they would have rather me have been home and had those issues than away. So my freshman year, I spent going to Quakertown. And once I was okay with that and I still had that desire to go out to school, then I went through the process and I spent sophomore and junior years out in Pittsburgh. But in the meantime, I made all these friends at Quakertown that I couldn't possibly not graduate with. So that was my decision to come back.
Yeah,
and
graduate with your friends. And did you feel like you had missed something? I mean, what did you had to have come back slightly different? Can you look back and think, as you went out as a sophomore and came back as a senior, who were you in that change? What change happened for you?
I feel like I was fortunate to have the same core friends that I had from my freshman year, like, like your best friend and like the little group that you have. Things like coming back and trying out for the track team and realizing that everyone else had had 4 years of experience and you're like just coming in like like a deer learning to walk, like that kind of stuff. And there obviously were some other memories like that even my best friend would talk about that obviously I wasn't there for. That sometimes I think, well, would I have, sacrificed the opportunity that I had in Pittsburgh just to, be back home with my friends and, kind of experience everything together.
Yeah, you got the best of both worlds in a lot of ways.
I really liked it, yeah.
Now, how did you decide what you were going to do next? Where did you go to college? What was the process leaving high school? You've obviously got this performance bug. Right. And what did you do next? I applied to, I should say, a number of schools. NYU was my first choice. And it was always going to be in a performance program. And so I was looking at Syracuse and can't think of it now. It's a school in Chicago. Of course, it wasn't Northwestern.
No, it starts with a D. I'm not thinking of it right now. But there are like 2 or 3 different schools. And I was looking to do a music business program because I liked the idea of performance, but I thought, I could work in the music business and, that sort of thing.
Be around it.
It, right? But not necessarily be like a performer. And as it turned out, I got into NYU. And I was in the music business program. Then I had a couple internships. And the whole radio thing didn't happen until after I actually graduated from school.
So the great, interestingly, as our backgrounds, I also went to NYU.
Yeah.
But I worked at the radio station.
Did you?
And didn't end up in radio.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I was actually the news director. I had a talk show. I was a reporter. I was oddly the sports director one year, which
I could believe it.
My husband was like, "You don't know anything about sports." I said, "Yeah, but I know about directing people."
Yeah, exactly. And that is like 3/4 the battle.
It was funny, but so I was very involved in the radio there, but I tell you this every time I see you, but I love radio so much.
Yeah.
It's probably why I like having a podcast.
Right.
But it's just such a great medium. I feel like it's just one of the best mediums we've got.
I've had the idea of being in radio, or what I thought radio was, started when I was like 3 or 4 years old. This is going to really sound like crazy, but I had a Bert and Ernie alarm clock. And I was fascinated with the sound that came out of this Bert and Ernie alarm clock. And I'm like, I like that. Now, I was 4, I don't know what it is, and I don't know the idea of it, but it kind of just kept on coming back. I listened to B104 growing up. I had other stations I listened to, as I was growing up and everything. And so when I finally had the opportunity to do radio as a thing, I was like, oh man, I'm actually doing this. And that was a couple years. I was already working when I finally made the now or never decision.
Now, where did you live at NYU? What was your home?
I lived in Goddard.
Okay.
And I lived in, what's the little one that's on the park but not Hayden? It's the other side.
Weinstein?
I lived in Weinstein. In Weinstein, yep. And then I lived in Third North.
Okay. Oh, that was a nice building, Third North. I lived in Reuben, so I was on Fifth.
Yeah.
And then moved out after a couple of years to an apartment. But
it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
It's a great place.
I feel like it was a great experience, but now that I've been out of school for a while, I wish there were certain things that I had done there that I hadn't done. But you don't realize it when you're...
Like what? Give me an example.
I don't know. I feel like I maybe would have tried to do a little bit more in the way of the sports. Not that I was good at any sports at all, but just to be in the... I felt like I was never in the gym.
Yeah.
I was never in the gym.
See, now I can say that as the sports director.
Right, you were always at the gym.
I was at the gym.
I probably could have studied more, spent more quality time in the library.
It is a pretty library, but...
It is, right. But I did do things like I was on a couple student councils. I did activities. The radio station thing. I'm so surprised that I never did it as one of my activities.
I think this should be our pitch to WNYU,
right?
89.1. That they should have us back to do a little guest spot.
Okay.
we're gonna tag them in this podcast. See what we can make
Let's
happen.
make this happen. Let's do it.
I'm still connected to my dean over there, so
Are
maybe
you?
we can make something happen. That
Are
would be
you
kinda fun.
an active alumni? Like, do you do a lot of things
I
there?
don't do a lot because of the kids and kind of raising children now out here, but I do try to donate, and I try to stay in touch with the email chains, and they do a lot. They have a really active, I think, alumni program and lecture series and things I aspire to be a part of when I have the time kind of to get in and out of the city a little bit more. But I love the community, and I love the experience.
I love it too.
I think when you talk about things you didn't do, and there of course are a lot, it's a very unique environment, but it also affords you the opportunity to do things that most college kids don't get to do. So are there any things like that in the city that you participated in that you feel like were unique to your experience?
Well, I mean, just like going out, like, you step out of your dorm and like you're in New York City. Any number of the clubs that you could hang out, or when you're old enough, bars. I had a job, actually. I was a work study for a while when I was at school. And I remember I had an opportunity to do exit interviews at the Natural Museum of History.
Really?
Like, they had an amber exhibit, and I was one of those people that stood outside of the exhibit, and I was like, so what'd you think? And on a scale of 5 to, whatever. And that was so much fun. Like, that was just a different, like, was an employee.
Who gets to say they did that?
Right.
Interesting.
I don't know, just trying all different kinds of foods and just
all right there,
meeting all different kinds of people.
Now you're doing music business.
I am.
And you're at the epicenter of the world.
Yep.
As New Yorkers like to think, but it certainly is in a lot of ways. What is next? When you start thinking about a job, what was your first job, and how did you get into it?
I had internships with Capitol Records. I did an internship with a teeny tiny orchestra company that was based out of Lincoln Center. And then I had an internship with this company called CTN. I believe at the time it was called UCTV. It was University College Television Network. And what they did was they offered music video jukeboxes, if you will, to colleges and universities. So think of like, you can watch a music video anywhere, like you don't even have to watch MTV anymore. But this was a kind of a kiosk that we'd set up in a college or university, like dining hall or social area, and they could go up and they press a button, and then whatever video that they wanted to watch from the menu would pop up on the screen, and then they, and it was free. We had like sponsors like Coca-Cola and, I think car company or two.
Kiosk was sort of like the original iPad.
Right.
Like
exactly.
It's hard for people to imagine that would be necessary, but we try to explain you didn't have that stuff at your fingertips. I mean, computer labs were sort of just popping up.
Right.
And
even do you remember like the sub-level in the library? That was a scary place
I remember
to hang
getting my first like real email address was through NYU and going to the computer. It was a big deal. You'd have to sign in and sign out. It was a purposeful activity.
Did you, and I know we're getting away from the question, but did you ever use the off-campus housing office?
I don't think so.
The off-campus...
Where was it?
It was a computer. In a hallway. And you went there, and they had all these listings. Now, I happened to find my apartment that way, but it was not an office. It was kind of tucked into like a corner.
I don't think so.
And it was...
That's funny.
Yeah, it was...
I remember kiosks starting. They looked like an ATM, sort of.
Yes.
And that was where you could go towards the end of my time there, where I could check my grades and things. It was like a digital bursar's office or something.
And then you either walked away like, happy or not so happy.
Yeah, exactly. So you had done all these cool internships.
Yes.
And one of those led to your first job?
Yes. So what happened with CTN is I was there. That was like my last internship. And then I was there after college. And then I said to the CFO, at the time it was a pretty small company, I said, I'm at the point now where like I'm going to lose my parents' insurance and I'm paying back my student loans. And they made it a job.
That's
and like
so great.
I got a job. And I stayed there for I think I was there for 2 or 3 years. Now the company turned into MTVU. So now it's actually a part of MTV. But while I was there, it was still its own independent company. I worked in sales for a while. So I was the person going out to the various schools trying to convince them to allow us to put this big, ugly machine in their cafeteria and everything.
Neat, though. Did you travel a lot? lot, or was it
I
fairly
did.
local? You got to travel?
I went up to Boston, down to Virginia, DC. So that was a lot of fun. But I remember doing that job, and the guy who trained me was this, guy who'd been in sales forever. I mean, he must have been in his late 70s, and he was old school sales. So he was saying all the dirty jokes, and he was, saying all the inappropriate things. But at the time, that was like, kind of like how he knew to do sales. So I had to like learn the idea of sales from him, but then I had to make it comfortable for me to do, because I wasn't going to be that person who was like, telling dirty sailor jokes or anything like that,
Didn't quite fit your
my persona, and I didn't have the confidence to do it either. So like I could just imagine trying to pull one of those off, and it just fallen like a lead balloon.
That's funny.
But while I was there, that was when I had my now or never moment, and I took a class at NYU in their adult education wing in radio. And that was being taught by a woman by the name of Jo Mader, who had been on Z100 for a long time.
Okay.
At the time she was my instructor, she was the voice of Showtime.
Oh, wow.
The voice of coming up next.
Yeah, definitely.
And that was her gig. So I met a lot of people. We had a tour of Howard Stern's studio when he was still on terrestrial radio.
Gosh, that's neat.
I had a lot of people from Z100 come in. And from that class, I ended up getting a job as a person who answered the phones, the request line at Z100.
That is neat.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay. And so what, at that point, when you're working in that first sales job, you've, of course, gone through all this education, you've been exposed to a lot of media. What made you say radio is what I'm interested in? How did you make that kind of pivot and shift?
I feel like it was always in the back of my mind, like something that I'd always thought about. I obviously hadn't had the experience of working at the college station, but it was one of those things that just wouldn't let go. And I figured it had nothing to do with what I was currently doing, with the exception of music. That was the big connection.
Right, but it wasn't that job wasn't going to get you to this goal.
So I just like taking that class, and then I got some practical experience, at a college in Brooklyn, and then, obviously working at the station actually it was in Secaucus, New Jersey, but, it just kind of happened. I'm not really sure what the transition was, except I just kind of started doing it.
Did you know right away? I mean, you're answering the request line, so you're probably psyched, right?
Yeah.
So young, you've got a job in a really, really big, reputable station.
Yeah.
Did you know right away? Yes, good choice.
I kind of did.
Yeah,
I kind of did. There were two mistakes I made while I was there. One was I gave myself a nickname, because all the other people who were answering the phones had nicknames, and I don't even remember what it was, like Sparky or Snoopy or something like that. But I remember Kid Kelly, who's still in radio, actually works for Sirius XM. He was still at Z100, and he's like, "No, don't use a nickname." And I really I internalized it, because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, am I in trouble?" I started using this nickname. Why am I the
one person without a nickname?
That he doesn't want me to use a nickname, and so it was like a weird thing. And then towards the end of my time there, I was working exclusively for the midday show for Lisa Taylor, and I was like her, producer and name only. Like I was really just answering the phones. But and they did a send off when I got the job at B104, and they played Billy Joel's Allentown on Z100, which is not the format at all. And again, I didn't ask for that to be done, but Kid came back in and be like, "Yeah, don't
do that."
And people don't really know who she is, which this was Lisa who was doing this for me, which I thought, well, that's so nice.
She knew who you are.
Right. But so I thought, I could have really just ended my career, and it hasn't even started yet,
Amazing. But kind of good advice, right? I mean, when you look back and you think that Kid went out of his way to say, don't use a nickname, don't get too associated, develop your own persona. Exactly. So you come to B104, back your hometown.
Yeah.
That's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Tell me what the station was like at that time. And what were you hired for? What was the original? Midday. Okay.
Yeah. So just prior to that, I think I was still working at Z100. I picked up an on-air job part-time at Y102 in Reading. So I was working for Z, usually during the day, and then sometimes I would fill in at night at Y102. So it's kind of making that commute back and forth.
And this is, we should say to people, this is when you would have to drive
Oh yeah.
to the actual station.
Versus
I mean, nowadays
you can
people
do it
can do it
anywhere,
anywhere.
for sure.
And I also want to point out that this is, you're in your early 20s and you're hustling.
Yeah.
You're hustling. You're working a lot of hours. You're
For
right
sure. Yep.
towards a goal. And how did you innately know that was something you sort of should do, needed to do? Were you encouraged to do it? Or was just you seized opportunity?
It was partially just seizing the opportunity and knowing that I had to work hard, but also I remember being in Pittsburgh, and even then I had applied for a job there. Totally unrealistic, but I applied for an on-air position at a station in Pittsburgh. I came in for an interview. I think it was like 15 years old. And then they came back to me and said, we don't want to hire anyone that young. We don't want to be responsible for you. Knowing full well, as little as I knew about the industry, that there were kids that started 13, 14, like really young, So it was partially like that determination of like,
I'm going to show
exactly. Mm-hmm. Like they turned me away when I was 15. I don't even know if the person's still in the business or whatever. But yeah, I really was like, I needed to prove something. I really did. And so getting back to B104, like what it was like when I went there, Ken Matthews was on mornings. Mike Kelly, I think is he doing afternoons already? He might have been doing nights. And I had a really great boss. His name was Brian Check. He's now in Philadelphia. And I don't know, I felt like I was learning as I was going. I was getting to know people. I was getting to know how to talk to people. I feel like I learned a lot, but I also needed to learn a lot more because I wasn't conversational. I was more like
planned, scripted, lines,
scripted,
delivery.
and not really, and not really having a conversation with somebody. More like just saying stuff, and if you choose to listen, well, that's great,
Also, I think there's that divide that happens in media, whether it's radio or TV, where we all develop, I guess, what we believe or perceive to be the way we're supposed to be.
Yes.
And when we learn to authentically be who we actually are.
Right.
And where those points intersect, I always feel like is the sweet spot of your career.
Yeah.
But it's funny how the pendulum sort of swings
really
a little
does.
bit.
It really does. I think that the way that I communicate now is very different than the last time I was on B104. And I think if someone took like the show that I used to do on the station versus what Mike and I do now, it's two very different animals because I got comfortable being in my own skin.
Also, it's very different to be your own host when you're just by yourself versus having a co-host. That's a whole nother layer. So tell me about this journey. You're at B104, working dayside.
Yeah.
What happens next?
My husband, I got married while I was there, and then shortly after I got married in 2003, he got an opportunity for a job down in Northern Virginia, just outside of D.C.
Okay, and is he from here?
He's not. He's from Jersey.
He's from New Jersey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another Jersey
Another
person,
Jersey.
right?
I have to tell you, we stick together. My husband's from Jersey too.
So anyway, so he got an opportunity to take a job down in the DC area, and I knew that we were going to be moving. So my boss hooked me up with a guy who was a PD for a station down in DC. And it was an oldie station, which you can only imagine, like, they're not going to listen to this, chick, hustling with the Temptations. I mean, come on now. Like, it's just not going to be believable. But I started working there on the weekends while I was still at B104. And then eventually I left when we moved. And I don't know how long I was there, but they kind of got rid of a bunch of the air talent. And so I took over the midday show of that station. And fortunately, I grew up in a house where my parents were always playing music. And my dad especially was always playing, Temptations and Supremes and
So
CCR.
you were pretty familiar with
the
this
catalog.
genre, yeah.
So even though I couldn't reflect from a life experience, I could reflect from I just want to have a conversation with you. And how's your day going? And, oh, by the way, I'm playing X, Y, and Z. And so that was a really great time. That was the second time that I actually got fired because the station flipped formats. And it was really weird because I was like, what do I do now? Like, the transition down to DC was just so almost like seamless. But
It's interesting. You look back too and think, for people who may not realize that radio, and television, but radio, I think in particular, from the millennial through maybe, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, was really going through a very transformative time.
Yes.
And they weren't sure where radio was going to end up.
Right.
Digital and television and iPads and whatever, podcasts, all this stuff. And so radio stations were, and also satellite radio had come about, right? So they were flipping formats. So explain, what does that mean, and why does that impact you either positively or negatively as talent?
Flipping formats is essentially like, just to give a very basic example, is like B104 is a top 40 station. Well, let's just say they decided it wasn't working anymore. They didn't have the same amount of advertisers. They weren't making the same kind of income. So what's going to work better for us? Being a classical station. I mean, that is a major change. And it doesn't have to be that drastic a change, but the idea of is you're going from something that's very familiar to your listeners to something completely different. And typically when that happens is you get rid of everything that was associated with the previous product.
Start fresh. So this happens to you in DC.
Yeah.
What was the format? You go from?
It was oldies, and then it kind of turned into like a rock station, if you will. But yeah, I remember
like
being
a K-rock kind of thing. Not classic.
Yeah, I guess you can consider it classic rock, sure. Anyway, I plugged my headphones into the board. I'm getting ready to do my first break, and my good buddy, who was the assistant program director, he came in and said, "You don't have to worry about it. Like, you don't have to.
Don't go back on.
You don't have to worry about it." I didn't even get to do a break that day. Like,
wow.
Literally my last shift, I believe that was a Monday. My last shift, or on air, whatever, had been the previous Friday. So, and that's what they do. They don't give you
incredible
they don't
timing.
give you
Wow.
the opportunity as like a personality or a talent to say goodbye to your listeners. I mean, that's, you disappear, and then if you happen to pop up on another property, great. If you don't,
What do you go through at that time, and how do you bounce back from that?
just emailing people and making a lot of phone calls.
Is it something sort of to be expected in the industry? I mean, do you watch it happen and you thought, okay, it's just, this is my time. Eventually this sort of thing happens to me as if I'm a radio disc jockey?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the luxury and the fortunate opportunity to stay in a market for a long time, and you make the decision to retire, I mean, that is fantastic.
That's the ideal.
But that just doesn't happen
Yeah.
a lot. It was a union station, so we got a little bit of a severance. So from that aspect, I felt okay. But especially when you're used to working and you love what you do, and all of a sudden you're told, "Oh, we don't need your services anymore." It's just like, oh, really? Yeah, it's like, okay. And I was the newbie. I mean, there were other people that had been on the station since its inception. There were other people on that station who, even though they hadn't been on the station since the beginning, were really well known air talent for the area.
Yeah, an audience gets very attached.
They do.
You get very attached.
Yeah.
The voice is familiar. The personalities become familiar. But lucky for us, this happened. And does this bring you back to the Lehigh Valley? I mean, what's...
No,
Okay.
I was in DC, then I worked at a couple other stations, and then my husband, we decided, I guess we had already had our older son. We decided to move back up to New Jersey because we all wanted to be closer to family. And so I was able once again to transfer. I was working for Metro Networks. They do all the traffic reports and stuff like that. So I was working for them down in DC, and I transferred to their New Jersey hub, which
that
served
worked
like
out.
New York and everything. And that was my job. And I did that for a while. And then I got a call from Mike saying that his host, at the time, his co-host, was going out on maternity leave. And would I be interested in co-hosting?
Wow.
Yeah. And
Now, how had you known Mike previously from when you were at B104?
Yes.
Okay, from the
and
first
we
job.
actually talked for a very long time. Like even when I was away and he was still at the station, we'd call each other from time to time and we'd joke and we'd do these like little bits on, just it kind of was natural. And we always said, it'd be great to do a show together. We really did. Like, we said that repeatedly. And so when the chance came up to do like fill-in work with him for this period of time, I was kind of already super scheduled with Metro, so I didn't want to leave them in a lurch, so I would really only come back here and work like 2 or 3 days a week. But I said to myself going into it, I said, this is going to be the best 12 weeks ever. If nothing comes from it, at least I know I've had the chance to do it. I don't know what, I can always go back to Metro Networks and continue working there. I'm fine with that for the time being. And that's how I kind of went into the experience, just knowing that it probably had an end.
And was it natural with Mike right away? Did you guys have to find a rhythm? Did you find that it was something you guys just fell into?
That was like 9 years ago. Oh my gosh, it was 9 years ago. I guess we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had our bumps in the road, but it's like talking to a friend. So, when you have a conversation with a friend, there might be those awkward pauses if, you're talking about something that's uncomfortable or whatever. But for the most part, it's a conversation that keeps going.
I think when you listen to you guys, besides being able to tell that there's such a level of genuine friendship, I think that there's a lot of trust. I feel like there's a lot of trust in those moments because you do talk about a lot of different topics.
Yeah.
Your personal lives come up a lot. Your opinions come up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you get that with somebody? Is it something you hear actors? We already established we are not actresses, but you hear actors all the time say that trust with their other actors is very important. Do you feel that way with Mike? Is that a key element?
I do. Like, I think, obviously there has to be, or you hope that there's like a natural chemistry, but then you can't be afraid. You have to, if the show or the program that you're choosing to do is one in which you are putting yourself out there, then you can't just tell yourself that you're putting yourself out there. You actually have to put yourself out there. And there are very few things that I've chosen not to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Like
you're open.
Right, I'm open. And the same thing. And in fact, I find that just because of how the show is, he has a tendency of having me kind of put a lot more out there than he does. So sometimes I feel like I go back to him and I'm like, well, what do you think? So that's something that I every now and again I'll notice. Like I feel like maybe I put a lot more myself out there than he does on occasion. But it always comes back around, where, we disagree about something. I'll have some outlandish reason why. He'll have a really funny punchline.
You guys. I've heard you guys bring some stuff up that you hold on to for a while.
Yeah.
Too.
Get
at it. Tell me a little bit about your family. You mentioned your husband. You mentioned having one son, but I know you have two.
I do.
So tell me a little bit about your 3 boys.
Yes, my 3 boys. So my husband, Nick, I am currently a cougar to him because he is 8 months younger than I am.
Oh, wow. Look
at
you.
Yeah, right? Hey. And he works in the maritime industry, which is completely different than radio. And it affords him the opportunity to do what he loves. He went to SUNY Maritime in New York. He worked on ships for a while. And now he works in the shipping industry.
I don't think I know anyone who works in the shipping industry and can say they work in a maritime. That's very nice. Okay.
So he travels quite a bit for his job. And before I ended up with the schedule that I have, I was able to travel with him here and there, which was nice. I have a 12-year-old son, also named Nick, and he's in 6th grade.
Can't believe he's already in 6th grade.
I know. And he, he's...
What kind of kid is he?
He is a pip. He's very smart. He's artistic. He loves to play soccer and basketball. He's very sensitive.
Sounds like a Renaissance man in the making.
Yeah, he just, he's a cool kid. I feel like we can talk about a lot of different things. we started having the questions about, the questions.
Yeah.
And
Sixth
and,
grade.
Yeah. And I never forget, we were sitting around the dinner table, and I think Sammy was in the other room doing something, but he just starts saying a bunch of things that are in that realm. And my husband, I swear to God, was melting onto the floor. Like,
This is not
he's like,
happening.
I'm not doing this. This is not happening. And you know what? It was okay for me to just do it. I went into it thinking that I was probably going to be the one.
I did that with my son too.
Right?
And I think what's cool is there's this very small window of time that you're in where they really are riding the fence of youth, of being a child and being an adult. Yeah. And they're still so kind of innocent and trusting, and they really love their moms in particular.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because it doesn't stay forever. In that way, but it's good, so embrace it. I think it's just a cool thing because I always felt like this is this special moment in time where he doesn't quite filter yet to me.
I know.
And I like that. I like the unfiltered kid moments.
It's like, oh, please just stay young a little bit longer.
What about your baby?
Sammy is 6, and hey, the difference between having Nick and having Sam was when I had Nikki, I was part-time on the air, and so I had this luxury of kind of coming back whenever I wanted to. And when I had Sammy, we were already doing the morning show, and those 3 months went by so fast. But he's my I kind of describe him as a cinder block on running feet, because he is full bore. He's very into sports. He too has a little bit of a sensitive side, but he's very matter of fact like his mom. I have a tendency to just say things and it's the way it is. Mm-hmm. It's not always right, but I just do it because that's just the way I am. And to hear a 6-year-old kind of have those similar speech patterns or mannerisms is just, I'm like, oh, Garrett, there you go.
There's nothing like the kid to be the mirror. Right? Like your child holds a mirror up to you.
It's like the best and worst of you,
sometimes, right? I'll see an expression, especially if it's something where they're a little quick with their tongue, which I know comes from me. Yeah. And I think, oh, wow, does it come across like that? So my mother would always say, soften, Ashley. I'm softening in my 40s. This is one of my 40s goals, Steph. Softening.
He's got, I can't believe that a 6-year-old can have that good a side eye. This kid has got side eye master,
that's awesome.
But he's in kindergarten now. He'll be in first grade next year, and we'll just see how he's different, academically and just with the whole school thing.
You keep, we had my sister-in-law Eve Russo in, and you guys keep similar schedules. We also had Becca in from Becca Alone, and we you guys you take being a working mom to a whole nother level. So tell us real briefly what's your schedule, and then how do you do it as a working mother? What advice do you have out there for women that are struggling to keep it all together?
Well, I usually get up between 2:30 and 3. I'm in my car between 4 and 4:30. On an early day, I'm home by 2. But on most days, we have other things that we do. So, I get home in time to pick up my kids from childcare. I feel like I try to get to as many things that my kids do, be it sporting events or concerts. And when I miss something, I feel incredibly guilty. But,
you also do a lot for this community. You don't live here. You're from here, and I think you have a heart for the Lehigh Valley, but people should note you have a long commute. Yeah. And it's tough to be an hour plus from your kids.
If I ever hit the lottery or, the trust fund, mysteriously appears, I would definitely hire a driver. So I didn't have to drive that. I could actually sleep in the car. But no, I think for the most part, and you know what it is too, I find that because I get so little sleep, my patience is not a good thing.
It's the first thing that goes when you're tired, isn't it amazing?
It's just, and so I deliberately get up a little bit extra earlier than I probably have to, just to get stuff done in the morning, so that when I'm home with them in the evening, I can just
be focused on them. And when you say morning, you really mean middle of the night for the rest of
us. Yes. Yeah.
Any advice that you have for moms out there?
Moms in general, I just, enjoy, all the moments, whether they're big, small, or, you can make anything a moment. When your kid, comes up to hug you, make sure that they're the first one that lets go.
Oh, I love that. I do that so much
Sorry.
now. See, it's funny.
See, I told you were gonna have a Barbara Walters moment.
The best part about that is like you're just at that beginning stage with your son, and now I find myself anytime my kids want me to come up and like snuggle with them or willingly give me a hug, I'm like that mom that's like hanging on, like because I get a lot of like this right now, like a brush off, like little, or it's like I have cooties or something to them. So I think that's such good advice.
Yeah.
Hang on, be the last one to let go of a
Seriously.
hug. Yeah,
And you will never have the control of the remote. So if you really want to watch something, you're gonna have to watch it in the middle of the night, or don't feel guilty if you choose to pick up your kids a little bit later from childcare just to watch a show or like take a bath
give
or
yourself
get a
a minute.
massage.
Yeah,
self-care is very important.
I think
It's
so, too.
You are a much better adjusted human if you take care
we
of
put
yourself.
ourselves last too often.
For
So
sure.
tell me your favorite. I'm going to get back to Mike for a second because I wouldn't want him to think we left him out too much. What is your favorite quality about Mike, and what drives you crazy about Mike?
Oh, how much time do we have? My favorite quality, man, he is so funny. He, even when he doesn't like mean to be, and he's really good at like, especially when we're on the air, like kind of wrapping it up and having that ability to just make it all make sense. He can also be sensitive, which you don't really find that combination, too often. What drives me crazy about him? Well, I don't know if I can say anything on the program. There are times when we just don't get along, like because we have a different approach to how we get our work done. We have a different opinion on, a particular topic. We have our moments.
It's really a work marriage. It's really a feat. Well, we're very, very lucky and fortunate to have you two in the area entertaining us and, educating us and giving back to this community. You guys do so much. You can see
and you do
everywhere.
Too.
Well,
I see you everywhere.
We tend to run into each other.
Listen, I gotta tell you something. This is I don't know if it's gonna be included or not, but this lady is in charge. Like, we get the chance. We do a lot of events together, but in particular, the celebration of caring for United Way. This woman gets up on the stage and she has her iPad with their script or whatever, and she never looks at it.
Not never.
Because you are amazing. And I just,
Thank you.
if there's someone to like look up to and just in terms of just being well-rounded and genuine and everything, like I really do. I really appreciate that, you're here and that I have the opportunity every now and again to share space with you.
Oh, wow.
It's really
I certainly
cool.
feel the same. Thank you. It's very nice of you to say.
Yes,
And
you're not gonna
I
cry?
really-
Come on, baby.
Come on.
You gotta shed some tears for me.
I'll come on your show and cry.
Okay,
How about
good.
that? We'll do
Yes.
that. Oh, you're so kind. Well, it has just been great having you here. Before I let you go, we do a little rapid fire.
Oh gosh.
Are you
Okay.
ready?
Oh no, I'm not ready. Okay.
What is the best place you've ever traveled to?
I can't think of Malta.
Malta. You've been to Malta?
I have, yeah.
Why were you in Malta?
For my husband's business trip,
How
and
cool
it was
is
just
that?
it was neat. It was like one of those
people,
places.
if you go into maritime work, I just like saying the word, can you tell?
Yeah.
You can travel to places like Malta.
Yeah.
Where is somewhere that you've never been that you would love to go?
I've never been to Thailand. That would be cool. I also have never been to Key West. That's,
Maybe that's a more immediate goal. With 2 kids, it might be more realistic. If you could use 3 words to describe yourself, what would they be?
Oh gosh. I hope funny.
You don't have to
Compassion.
hope. It's your description.
Compassionate. Sensitive, I guess, but in a good way.
Okay.
And funny, I guess.
Funny?
Yeah.
Funny's important?
Yeah.
You are funny, so you don't have to worry
Thank
about
you.
that one. That's the truth. If you could have dinner with anyone, living or deceased, who would you have dinner with?
I love jazz music, and so if I had a daughter, and my husband was agreeable, I would have loved her name to be Ella Simone. So Ella Fitzgerald is very high on the list. And I don't know what I would get from the experience, except that, maybe we'd hang out and,
Maybe go to like the Carlisle in New York, and she'd just jump up
and then
on
do like a little
stage
scat, like, and sing together.
So Steph,
and,
come up here with me.
Yeah, and I'd be like, oh, I'd be melting, and like, I'd just be like, oh, you really want me? That's so awesome.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, if you insist.
I love it. If you were not doing what you are doing now, what job would you have?
Oh gosh. Well, I really love Target. So I could just as easily work there. I don't know. I see myself doing stuff in the community. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm working on that.
All right.
I'm working on
You're
that.
working on that.
I am.
Well, you do a lot in the community, and we're lucky to have you here. So thank you for
you.
joining us
Thank
on the
you.
podcast.
Give me
This has
a
been a
hug.
blast, of course.
Oh, thanks.
We love it, and everybody needs to keep listening to B104,
Yes,
Mike and
please.
Steph in the morning. And we thank you for joining us on our podcast. This is Unscripted with Russo.